The screenshot appeared on my phone at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, just as I was reviewing quarterly projections for the merger. Unknown number. I almost deleted it without looking. Privacy in my position meant being selective about what strangers could send me. But something made me tap it open. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The text message chain filled my screen, and I recognized Marcus's profile picture immediately. That same cocky half-smile he'd worn when he served me divorce papers 18 months ago, standing in our kitchen while I was still in my surgical scrubs from a 12-hour shift at the hospital. "She's absolutely unhinged," his message read. "Legitimately crazy. Had to get a restraining order and everything." My coffee cup paused halfway to my lips. "The money thing?" Another message continued. "Total fraud. She pretended to be some big shot surgeon, but it was all debt. Credit cards maxed out, borrowing from family. I'm talking hundreds of thousands in the red. When I finally left, she tried to take me for everything in the divorce. Thank God I had a good lawyer." I set my coffee down carefully on the mahogany desk, my hands steadier than they had any right to be. The office suddenly felt too quiet, just the hum of the City 40 stories below and my own measured breathing. Another screenshot appeared, this one showing Marcus's date's response. "Oh my God, that's terrible. I'm so sorry you went through that." Then my phone rang. Same unknown number. "Dr. Chen?" A woman's voice, young, nervous. I'm so sorry to bother you this late. My name is Julie Whitmore. I start as your executive assistant on Monday, and I think I just went on a date with your ex-husband." I leaned back in my leather chair, processing. Julie Whitmore. Yes. 26, MBA from Northwestern, impeccable references, interviewed beautifully. I'd personally selected her from a pool of 40 candidates to be my right hand as I navigated the most crucial 18 months of my career. The merger with Cordova Medical Group would make me the youngest chief medical officer in the network's history, overseeing 14 hospitals across 3 states. "Ms. Whitmore," I said calmly, "take a breath. Tell me what happened." "I'm on the metro, heading home." Her voice cracked slightly. "We were at Morton's, the steakhouse downtown. He seemed so nice on the app." "Successful real estate developer," he said. "Charming. We were having wine and he started talking about his psycho ex-wife, and She paused. "I remembered from my background check paperwork that your maiden name was different from your current name. Chen versus Morrison. And when he said his ex was a surgeon named Vivian, I knew." "And you screenshotted the conversation." "Every single message from the past 2 weeks, including the ones where She hesitated. "Where he said you faked your medical credentials, that you were investigated by the licensing board, that you stalked him after the divorce and showed up at his office making scenes." None of it was true. Not a single word. But Marcus had always been gifted at crafting narratives. That's what made him so successful in real estate. The ability to sell a vision, to make people believe in something that didn't exist yet. He'd sold me a vision once too. The supportive husband who'd stand beside his surgeon wife through residency and fellowship. Who'd understand the long hours and the emotional toll and the nights I came home, too exhausted to speak. What he'd actually wanted was a doctor's salary without a doctor's schedule, someone to fund his lifestyle while he built his portfolio. And when I started spending less time at home and more time building my career, when I stopped being conveniently available to play hostess at his networking events and trophy wife at his business dinners, the vision cracked. "Ms. Whitmore," I said carefully, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. However, you should know that you're under no obligation to— He's still texting me, she interrupted. Right now. He wants to meet again this weekend. He's saying, Dr. Chen, he's saying he can prove all of it. That he has documentation about your financial fraud and your erratic behavior. He's offering to show me the restraining order. A restraining order that didn't exist, had never existed. I opened my laptop, fingers already moving across the keyboard. What restaurant did you say you were at? Morton's, downtown. Did he pay with a card? Yes, corporate card actually. He made a point of mentioning it. Said something about business development expenses. My smile was cold and private. Marcus worked for Hendricks & Lowe Real Estate Development. I knew this because I made it my business to know everything about my ex-husband's life, not out of obsession, but out of simple professional caution. We moved in overlapping circles. Commercial medical real estate was big business, and Marcus specialized in medical office buildings. What Marcus didn't know was that Hendricks & Lowe had been courting Cordova Medical Group for 6 months, trying to lock down the contract for our new surgical center expansion, a $40 million project, and I had final approval on all vendor selections. Ms. Whitmore, I need you to send me everything, every text, every screenshot. Can you do that? Already done. I sent them to your private email before I called. Her voice softened. Dr. Chen, I don't know what happened between you two, and it's none of my business. But I spent 6 weeks researching you before my interview. You have 3 board certifications. You published in the New England Journal of Medicine. You revolutionized trauma protocols at Metropolitan General. And this guy is sitting across from me, eating a $200 steak, telling me you're a fraud who can't hold down a job. What did you tell him? That I needed to use the restroom. Then I climbed out the bathroom window and took the metro home. A bitter laugh. I'm a terrible liar. My grandmother always said my face gives everything away. I knew if I sat back down, he'd see that I knew. Smart girl. I'd chosen well. Get home safe, I told her. We'll discuss this Monday morning. And Ms. Whitmore, not a word of this to anyone. Not yet. Understood. I ended the call and opened my email. Julie's message was there, time-stamped 11:43 p.m., with 47 screenshots attached. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, Pappy Van Winkle, a gift from the hospital board when I'd successfully negotiated our last insurance contract, and began reading. The messages painted a picture I recognized intimately. Marcus, the wounded victim. Marcus, the patient man who'd tried everything to help his unstable wife. Marcus, who'd finally been forced to protect himself from a woman who'd turned violent and vindictive when he dared to leave. She threw a lamp at my head during our last fight. One message claimed, I still have the scar. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The lamp story was true. I had thrown a lamp. At the wall beside him, after finding out he'd emptied our joint savings account to invest in a sure-thing cryptocurrency scheme. $40,000 gone. He'd never asked, never discussed it. Just decided that my emergency fund, the money I'd saved during medical school, the cushion I'd built during residency, was his to gamble with. The scar on his head came from a skiing accident in Aspen, a trip he'd taken with his college buddies while I covered a holiday shift in the trauma unit. She once showed up at my office screaming, another message read. Building security had to remove her, totally unhinged. That was creative. I'd never been to his office unannounced in my life. I'd barely been to his office at all. Marcus preferred keeping his work life separate, he'd said. Now I understood why. Harder to explain the wife at home to the various women he'd been networking with. I'd discovered the affairs 3 months before he filed for divorce. Not through some dramatic confrontation or hired detective, but through sheer mundane chance. A pharmacy receipt in his jacket pocket for a medication I didn't recognize. A quick medical database search revealed it was for a condition Marcus didn't have, but his mistress apparently did. From there, the thread had unraveled quickly. Credit card statements I'd never seen, showing hotel charges and restaurant bills while I was at work. Text messages on his iPad that he'd forgotten to delete, synced carelessly to the cloud. A whole alternate life, funded by my salary, conducted in the gaps between my shifts. When I confronted him, he'd already had his exit strategy planned, filed papers the next day, moved out within a week, and then began the systematic character assassination because Marcus couldn't just leave. He had to win, had to control the narrative, had to make sure everyone knew he was the victim and I was the villain. The divorce had been vicious but swift. He'd wanted it finalized quickly before I could hide assets or manufacture evidence. In reality, he wanted it done before I could properly audit our finances and discover exactly how much of my money he'd burned through. My lawyer had been a shark, Catherine Joe, the best divorce attorney in the city. She'd taken one look at Marcus's claims, one look at my documentation, and smiled like a cat with cream. "We're going to destroy him," she'd said. But I'd stopped her, settled quickly, let Marcus walk away with far more than he deserved, because I was staring down the barrel of my fellowship examination, and I needed him gone more than I needed vindication. Catherine had been furious. "You're letting him win," she'd said. "No," I'd told her. "I'm choosing my battles." What I hadn't told her, what I hadn't told anyone, was that I was already planning for the long game. Marcus thought in months and quarters. I thought in years and decades. Now, reading Julie's screenshots, I felt the same cold clarity I experienced in the operating room when a surgery went sideways. Emotion locked away, variables calculated, options assessed. My phone buzzed. Another message from Julie. "He just asked if I'm okay, says he's worried. Should I respond?" I typed quickly, "Tell him you're fine. Bad sushi at lunch. Apologize for leaving. Suggest coffee this weekend instead. Somewhere public, casual. Act interested in his documentation." 3 dots appeared, then, "You want me to keep seeing him?" "I want you to keep him talking. Can you do that?" A longer pause this time, then, "Yes. But Dr. Chen, what are you planning?" I looked at my laptop screen, at the open files on Cordova Medical Group's vendor selection process, at the bid from Hendricks and Lowe, competitive and professional, promising timelines and budgets that I knew from industry experience they'd struggle to meet, at the alternative bids from firms that might cost slightly more but would deliver without the complications. "Nothing he doesn't deserve," I typed. Then, reconsidering, "Nothing illegal, nothing unethical, just the natural consequences of his choices. Are you comfortable with that?" The response came immediately. After 2 weeks of him playing victim while planning to show me fake restraining orders, "Dr. Chen, I'm not just comfortable, I'm invested." I smiled despite myself. "Get some rest, Ms. Whitmore. Monday will be a busy day." "Call me Julie. If we're doing this, might as well use first names." "Then call me Vivian. But only when it's just us. Professional boundaries in front of others." "Understood. Vivian, thank you for trusting me with this." I set my phone down and returned to the screenshots, reading more carefully now, taking notes. Marcus had been thorough in his character assassination. Every message revealed new fabrications, each one built on a kernel of truth twisted beyond recognition. The investigation by the licensing board had been a routine audit that every surgeon underwent. The stalking was me attending a charity gala that Marcus's firm had sponsored, an event I'd had on my calendar for 6 months, long before I knew he'd be there. The financial fraud was the complicated reality of medical school debt and resident salaries, which Marcus had apparently never actually understood despite being married to me through all of it. But the restraining order was new. That was a bold lie, one that could be easily disproven but would cause damage in the interim. Once that kind of accusation entered the ecosystem, it lingered. People remembered the scandal, not the retraction. I opened a new document and began typing, organizing information methodically. I'd learned this approach during my research fellowship. Break down the complex problem into manageable components, address each systematically. Component 1. Marcus's current situation senior associate at Hendricks & Lowe, working on medical real estate projects. Recently assigned to Cordova Medical Group bid. Using company resources for personal dating expenses, making defamatory statements about a medical professional who has direct influence over his firm's largest potential contract. Component 2, Julie's role. New executive assistant, starts Monday tech savvy, evidenced by her quick thinking with screenshots, loyal, evidenced by her contacting me immediately. Willing to participate in ongoing information gathering, has established rapport with Marcus Component 3. The merger final vendor selections due in 6 weeks. Board meeting to approve selections in 8 weeks. My recommendation carries significant weight. Alternative vendors available and qualified decision must be defensible based on objective criteria. Component 4. Professional reputation. Multiple witnesses to Marcus's claims, anyone he's dated, befriended, networked with. Potential impact on my career if allegations spread. Need to address proactively without appearing vindictive. Documentation is key. I worked until 2 a.m., building a framework. Not revenge. I didn't have time for revenge. But accountability, consequences. The natural result of Marcus's choices catching up with him. By the time I closed my laptop, I had a plan. It would require patience, precision, and Julie's continued cooperation. But it was doable. More than doable. It was elegant in its simplicity. Marcus had made a critical error. In his eagerness to impress a young, attractive woman, he'd chosen the wrong target. He'd handed me the ammunition and the opportunity all at once. I slept better that night than I had in months. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that made the city look almost beautiful. I was in my office by 6 as usual, reviewing surgical schedules and preparing for Julie's first day. My office suite took up the corner of the executive floor, windows overlooking the city on 2 sides, decorated in the clean modern aesthetic that helped me think clearly. Whites and grays, and the occasional pop of color from medical journals stacked precisely on the shelves. Julie arrived at 8:30 sharp, wearing a navy suit that was professional without being stuffy, her dark hair pulled back efficiently. She looked nervous but determined, the same expression I recognized from her interview. "Good morning," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "Coffee? Please. Black." I poured from the French press I kept in my office, one of my few indulgences, and handed her a cup. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us knowing this conversation was happening off the books, before the official first day began. "He texted me 17 times over the weekend," Julie said finally. "Apologies for me, not feeling well. Offers to bring me soup. Suggestions for low-key dates where we could really talk." She pulled out her phone, setting it on the desk between us. I played it exactly like you said, apologetic, interested, mildly flirtatious. We're meeting for coffee Wednesday afternoon. Where? Grindhouse, the place near his office. He suggested it, said he could step away for an hour between meetings. I made a note. Did he mention the documentation again? 3 times. He's very eager to show me proof of your fraud. I think he sees it as some kind of bonding moment. Him protecting me from the dangerous crazy ex. How much do you know about defamation law? Julie's expression shifted slightly. Enough to know that truth is an absolute defense, and that proving damages can be complicated in cases involving public figures or professionals. Did you study law before business school? Minor in legal studies. I figured it would be useful in corporate environments. She paused. Is that what we're building toward? A defamation case? No. I sipped my coffee, organizing my thoughts. A defamation case would be satisfying but impractical. It would take years, cost a fortune, and require me to relive the worst period of my life in depositions and courtrooms. Even if I won, Marcus could claim bankruptcy and I'd collect nothing. The damage to both our reputations would be significant. Then what are we doing? We're letting Marcus be Marcus, and documenting it thoroughly. I turned my laptop around, showing her the spreadsheet I'd built over the weekend. Column 1, every statement he's made about me in your text chain. Column 2, the actual truth of each situation. Column 3, witnesses or documentation supporting the truth. Column 4, potential professional or legal consequences if his lies were believed. Julie leaned forward, scanning the rows. Her expression grew darker with each line. He's claiming you committed insurance fraud, she said slowly. That you billed for procedures you didn't perform. He is. And that particular lie crosses a line from defamation into something more serious. Falsely accusing a physician of billing fraud can trigger investigations by insurance companies, state medical boards, even federal agencies. It's not just damaging to reputation, it's potentially criminal harassment. But you haven't been investigated. Not yet. But if Marcus is telling this story to you, he's telling it to others. And eventually, someone might believe it enough to file a formal complaint. Even a baseless complaint requires months of my time to defend against, distracts from my work, and creates a cloud of suspicion. Julie sat back, processing. So we need to stop him from spreading these lies. No, we need to let him spread them to the right person. Someone who has the authority and responsibility to address them. His employer. I nodded. Hendricks & Lowe has a code of conduct. I pulled it from their website this weekend. Section 14.3 specifically addresses employee behavior that could damage client relationships or create liability for the firm. Making false and defamatory statements about a client's chief medical officer while conducting business on behalf of that client, using company resources no less, would arguably violate that code. But Cordova Medical Group isn't their client yet. We're in active negotiations, close enough, and either way, Marcus is creating professional liability for his firm. He's using their corporate card to wine and dine women while telling them lies that could expose Hendricks & Lowe to defamation claims. Most companies take a dim view of that kind of risk. Julie was quiet for a long moment. You want to get him fired. I want his employers to know exactly what kind of person they've entrusted with their reputation and their client relationships. What they do with that information is up to them. And the vendor selection will be based entirely on objective criteria. Bids, timelines, references, past performance. If Hendricks & Lowe submits the strongest proposal, they'll win the contract. If they don't, They won't. Marcus's employment status doesn't factor into that evaluation. But you're hoping they won't be the strongest proposal. I met her eyes steadily. I'm hoping that I can make this decision without having to work with a man who's spending his free time telling people I'm a criminal. But if their bid is significantly better than alternatives, I'll put on my professional face and shake Marcus's hand at the contract signing, because that's what the job requires. And if their bid is marginal, close to another firm's, but not clearly superior, then I'll select the vendor that doesn't come with personal complications, which is exactly what any reasonable person would do in my position. Julie picked up her coffee, took a slow drink, thinking, "When do you need the documentation compiled?" 2 weeks. I have a preliminary meeting with the board to discuss vendor options. I'll need to be prepared to explain any concerns about Hendricks and Lowe's professionalism if they ask. They'll ask why you didn't report this earlier. And I'll explain that I wanted to verify the situation before bringing allegations to their attention, that I took the time to ensure I had complete documentation, that I prioritized the institution's interests over my personal discomfort. Which is all true. Which is all true, I agreed. I'm not manufacturing a scandal, Julie. I'm simply making sure that when Marcus's behavior catches up with him, it does so in a professional context where appropriate action can be taken. She nodded slowly. My coffee date Wednesday. What do you want me to focus on? Let him show you his documentation. Take photos if you can, but don't be obvious about it. Ask questions, act sympathetic but curious. The goal is to get him to commit to his lies on record, to elaborate on them. The more specific he gets, the easier it is to disprove. What if he wants to meet again after that? Then you're busy, swamped with your new job. You like him, you're interested, but the timing is challenging. String it along gently. The longer he thinks you're a potential girlfriend, the more he'll share trying to impress you. Julie's smile was sharp. You've thought this through. I've spent 18 months thinking about Marcus getting away with destroying my reputation while playing the victim. I'm extremely motivated to be thorough. We spent the next hour going over her actual job responsibilities, calendar management, correspondence, meeting preparation, the complex ecosystem of hospital administration that she'd need to navigate. Julie was bright and caught on quickly, asking smart questions and taking detailed notes. At 10 a.m., I walked her through the executive floor, introducing her to key players. Marcus would hear within days that I'd hired a new assistant. I wanted him to hear it through the normal channels, not make the connection to Julie himself. One more thing, I said as we returned to my office. If at any point this becomes uncomfortable for you, say so. Your job here is secure regardless. I'm not requiring this of you. I know, Julie said. But Dr. Chen, Vivian, this man spent 2 weeks building trust with me specifically so he could show me evidence of your fraud. He's not just lying about you. He's actively trying to damage your career, using me as his weapon. That's not okay. No, I agreed. It's not. Then let's make sure he faces actual consequences for once. After Julie left to set up her workstation, I turned to my computer and began the necessary work of separating emotion from strategy. This was something I'd learned in surgery, the ability to care deeply about the patient while remaining clinically detached during the procedure. You couldn't operate effectively if your hands were shaking with fear or anger. Marcus had hurt me badly. The divorce had been traumatic. The character assassination had been worse. But none of that could drive my decisions now. This had to be about professional standards and institutional protection. It had to be defensible. I opened the vendor proposals and began my genuine analysis. Hendricks and Lowe's bid was solid. Not exceptional, but solid. They promised an 18-month timeline for the surgical center expansion, with a buffer built in for unexpected complications. Their cost projections were reasonable if slightly optimistic. Their references were good, mostly from smaller medical office buildings rather than full surgical facilities. The competing bid from Morrison and Associates was more expensive by about 8%, but their timeline was more realistic at 20 months. Their references included 3 surgical centers of similar scope. Their team had more experience with the specific technical requirements of operating rooms and sterile environments. On paper, Morrison and Associates was the safer choice. More expensive, yes, but with less risk of delays or cost overruns. A reasonable person could justify selecting them purely on merit, but I knew what would happen if I recommended them over Hendricks and Lowe. Marcus would cry foul. He'd claim I was biased, that I'd sabotaged his firm out of spite. He might even file a complaint with the hospital board or threaten legal action. Unless I had documentation showing that my concerns about Hendricks and Lowe went beyond personal history. Unless I had evidence that their senior associate was actively creating professional liability for their firm. Unless I could demonstrate that I'd raised these concerns appropriately and given them the opportunity to address the situation. That's what the next 2 weeks would build. Not revenge, just a very thorough paper trail. My phone rang. The hospital's chief operating officer, David Reeves. "Vivian, do you have a minute? Need to discuss the vendor timeline." "Of course. Come by whenever." David appeared 10 minutes later, a tall man in his 60s who'd been with the hospital system for 30 years. He'd supported my appointment as CMO over several more senior candidates, betting on my combination of clinical excellence and administrative savvy. I owed him honesty. "The board's getting antsy about the surgical center," he said, settling into the chair Julie had occupied earlier. "They want decisions finalized before the new fiscal year. That gives us 6 weeks. I know, I'm doing final evaluations now. Any front runners?" I hesitated, then decided to plant the seed early. Morrison and Associates has the strongest technical proposal. Hendricks and Lowe is more aggressive on timeline and cost, but I have some concerns about their experience with projects of this scope. "What kind of concerns?" "Nothing definitive yet, just wanting to do thorough due diligence before committing $40 million. David nodded approvingly. "That's why we hired you. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, dig deeper." After he left, I sat for a long moment staring at the city through my windows. The afternoon sun was hitting the glass towers at an angle that made them look like they were burning. Appropriate. My phone buzzed. "Julie. He's already texted. Confirming Wednesday C or PM. Says he has so much to tell me about his ex. Should I respond?" I typed back. "Perfect. Enthusiastic but brief. You're excited to see him but busy with new job. Let him think you're eager to hear his side of things." What Marcus didn't understand, what he'd never understood about me, was that I didn't operate on impulse. Every decision I made was calculated, weighed, and measured. That's what made me good at surgery. The ability to stay calm when everything was going wrong, to find the solution hidden in the chaos. Marcus thought of himself as a strategist, a planner, someone who thought 3 moves ahead. But I thought in terms of entire games. And this particular game had been in play since the day he'd served me divorce papers. He just hadn't realized we were still playing. Wednesday would be interesting. Wednesday afternoon, Julie texted me a single word. "Recording." I was in a budget meeting when my phone vibrated, but I glanced down long enough to see it. She'd arrived at the coffee shop. Marcus was already talking. The meeting dragged on for another 90 minutes. capital expenditure projections, staffing ratios, the endless bureaucracy of hospital administration. I nodded at appropriate moments, asked clarifying questions, but my mind was elsewhere. At a coffee shop across town, my ex-husband was digging his own grave, one defamatory statement at a time. When I finally returned to my office, Julie was waiting. She looked pale but composed, her phone sitting on my desk like evidence at a crime scene. "He showed me everything," she said quietly. "Or what he thinks is everything." I sat down across from her. "Walk me through it." Julie pulled up her notes. She'd been meticulous. I had to give her that. "He started with the financial stuff. Showed me bank statements from when you were married, highlighted withdrawals and transfers. Said you were hemorrhaging money on shopping and spa treatments. That he had to hide assets to protect himself from your spending. Those withdrawals were student loan payments and medical licensing fees," I said. "I have the documentation." "I know. I cross-referenced the dates on my phone while he was talking, pretended I was taking notes about his story. Every spa treatment matched up with board examination fees or continuing education courses." She shook her head. "He's built this entire narrative where every legitimate professional expense is proof of your fraud." "What else?" "The restraining order." Julie's expression hardened. "He pulled out this document. Vivian, it looked official. Court header, case number, judge's signature, everything. Temporary restraining order filed by Marcus Morrison against Vivian Chen Morrison, dated 14 months ago, alleging harassment, stalking, threats of violence." My blood went cold. "Let me see it." She handed me her phone. The photograph showed exactly what she'd described, a restraining order that looked entirely legitimate. Except it wasn't. It couldn't be, because it had never happened. I zoomed in on the case number, memorizing it. "This is new. He didn't have this during the divorce." "Can you fake something like that?" "You can fake anything with the right software and a decent printer." I forwarded the image to myself. But this is a different level of deception. This isn't just lying to dates. This is forging legal documents. That's a crime. Julie leaned forward. "There's more. He said you tried to get him fired from his previous job, that you called his boss and made false allegations about him stealing from clients. He claims that's why he had to change firms. You destroyed his reputation. I never contacted his employer. Not once." I thought back to that period, the chaos of the divorce. Marcus left his previous firm because they were downsizing. He spun it as a voluntary move, said Hendricks and Lowe made him a better offer. It was in our divorce proceedings. He used his job change to argue he needed less spousal support because his income was uncertain during the transition. So he's using the same situation to tell two different stories, whichever one benefits him more. Exactly. I pulled up my laptop, already typing. "Julie, I need to ask you something. How far are you willing to take this?" She didn't hesitate. "All the way. Even if it means potentially testifying about what he showed you, even if it means being involved in reporting document fraud." "Especially if it means that." Her voice was steady. "Dr. Chen, my mother is a family court judge. I grew up understanding that the legal system only works if people tell the truth. What Marcus is doing, forging restraining orders, making false accusations, that's not just lying. That's perverting justice. If he's willing to create fake court documents to impress a date, what else has he done? How many other people has he shown this to? Has he used it in professional settings? Has some woman somewhere lost a job opportunity because Marcus showed a potential employer this fake restraining order?" She was right. I'd been thinking about this as a personal attack, as Marcus trying to salvage his ego by destroying my reputation. But the forged restraining order changed everything. This wasn't just defamation anymore. This was a pattern of criminal behavior. "Okay," I said slowly. "Here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to verify that this case number doesn't exist in the court system. Then I'm going to contact my attorney, the one who handled my divorce. She'll know the proper channels for reporting document fraud. While that's happening, I'm going to complete my vendor evaluation and make my recommendation to the board based purely on the merits of each proposal. And Hendricks and Lowe? If their bid is truly the best option, I'll recuse myself from the final vote and let the board decide. I'll explain that I have a personal conflict of interest involving one of their employees. But Julie, I've spent the past 3 days reviewing these proposals in detail. Hendricks and Lowe isn't the best option. Morrison and Associates has better references, more relevant experience, and more realistic timelines. The only reason to choose Hendricks and Lowe would be to save 8% on the initial bid, which we'd likely lose anyway when they hit the inevitable delays and cost overruns. So you're going to recommend Morrison and Associates. I'm going to recommend the vendor that gives us the best chance of completing this project on time and on budget. That happens to be Morrison and Associates. Marcus's behavior isn't influencing that decision. The facts are. Julie nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" "Everything you recorded today. Every text message. Every photo. I'm going to have my attorney package it all together with the evidence from the divorce proceedings. We're building a case not for defamation, but for fraud and forgery. That's something prosecutors actually care about." Over the next week, things moved quickly. Catherine Zhou, my divorce attorney, took one look at the forged restraining order and immediately contacted the district attorney's office. Turns out forging court documents is taken very seriously. It's a felony in our state, carrying up to 5 years in prison. "They'll investigate," Catherine told me over coffee at her office. "But Vivian, you need to understand this could take months. The DA will want to verify everything, interview witnesses, maybe even set up a sting to catch Marcus using the document again." "I understand. I just want it on record. I want the truth documented." "The truth is that your ex-husband is a sociopath who's been running a smear campaign against you while committing multiple felonies." Catherine's expression was grim. "I should have fought harder during the divorce. I knew something was off about his narrative, but I didn't push because you wanted it over quickly." "You did exactly what I asked you to do," I assured her. "This isn't on you." "What about the vendor selection?" "Board meeting is tomorrow. I'm recommending Morrison and Associates. Hendricks and Lowe will be disappointed, but they'll survive. They have plenty of other projects." "And Marcus?" "Marcus is about to discover that actions have consequences." The board meeting was straightforward. I presented both proposals objectively, highlighting strengths and weaknesses of each. When I recommended Morrison and Associates, not a single board member questioned it. The data supported the decision clearly. David Reeves nodded approvingly. The vote was unanimous. 2 hours after the board meeting, I received an angry email from Marcus. He'd heard about the decision through his company's grapevine. "I know this was personal," his email read. "I know you tanked our bid because you can't let go of the past. This is exactly the kind of vindictive behavior I was talking about. I'm filing a formal complaint with the hospital board about your conflict of interest. You'll be lucky if you still have a job by the end of the month." I forwarded the email to Catherine without responding. Let Marcus rage. Let him file complaints. Every action he took now just added to the documentation. 3 days later, Julie knocked on my office door looking shaken. "He knows," she said. "Marcus just called me. He knows I work for you." My stomach dropped. What did he say? That I was a liar, that I had betrayed his trust, that he should have known better than to date someone young enough to be easily manipulated by a psycho ex-wife. She sat down heavily. He said he's going to make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are, that he's going to expose the truth about your fraud. Did he threaten you directly? He said my career was over before it started, that he'd make sure no one in the medical real estate industry would work with me, that I'd made a huge mistake choosing the wrong side. I pulled out my phone and called Catherine immediately. Marcus just made threats against my assistant. I need you to hear this. I put the phone on speaker and had Julie repeat everything. Catherine's response was immediate. That's witness intimidation. I'm calling the DA right now. Julie, I need you to write down everything he said, word for word, while it's fresh in your memory. Vivian, do not respond to Marcus. Do not engage at all. Let him keep digging. The DA's office moved faster than I expected. Apparently, forging court documents combined with witness intimidation was enough to warrant immediate attention. Within a week, detectives had interviewed both me and Julie, collected all our documentation, and obtained a warrant for Marcus's electronic devices and records. I was in surgery when they arrested him, a 12-hour reconstruction on a trauma patient, the kind of complex case that required every ounce of my focus. When I finally emerged, exhausted and drained, Julie was waiting with her phone. It's all over the news, she said quietly. Real estate developer arrested for document forgery and fraud. They're not naming you specifically, but they mention false allegations against a medical professional and forged restraining orders. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a hollow sort of completion. Like finishing a marathon, relief that it was over, but too tired to celebrate. How are you doing? I asked her. Julie managed a small smile. Better than I expected. My mom called. She said she was proud of me for coming forward. Said too many people stay silent when they witness fraud. Your mom's right. Marcus's firm put out a statement, Julie continued. They're cooperating fully with the investigation and have terminated Mr. Morrison's employment effective immediately. They're also withdrawing their bid for the surgical center project, citing internal restructuring. That was smart on their part. Distance themselves from Marcus completely, avoid any hint of being complicit in his behavior. Over the following weeks, the story unfolded in ways I couldn't have predicted. The DA's investigation revealed that Marcus had used the forged restraining order on multiple occasions, showing it to dates, to potential employers, even once to a mutual friend who'd questioned his version of our divorce. Each instance was another count of fraud. They also discovered that Marcus had been using his corporate card for personal expenses far beyond the occasional business dinner. Hotel rooms, shopping sprees, gambling losses at casinos, thousands of dollars in fraudulent charges. Hendricks and Lowe had been bleeding money for months, and Marcus had been the leak. The criminal case moved forward. Marcus hired an expensive attorney and tried to fight the charges, but the evidence was overwhelming. In the end, he took a plea deal. 3 years probation, restitution to Hendricks and Lowe, and a permanent record. No jail time, but enough consequences to matter. Catherine Zhou called me the day the plea was finalized. It's over, she said. Officially. Marcus Morrison has pled guilty to felony fraud and document forgery. The restraining order has been formally declared fraudulent and expunged from any records. You're clear. Thank you, I said quietly, for everything. Vivian, I've been practicing family law for 20 years. I've seen plenty of ugly divorces, plenty of spiteful exes, but I've never seen someone go to the lengths Marcus did to destroy his ex-wife's reputation. You did the right thing by coming forward. You potentially saved other people from being victimized by his lies. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, watching the city lights come on as dusk fell. Julie appeared in my doorway eventually, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. "Thought you might need this," she said, handing me one. "Thank you. And Julie, thank you for everything else too. For having the courage to reach out that first night. For being willing to help document everything. This wouldn't have happened without you." She settled into the chair across from me, the same chair where this had all started weeks ago. "I've been thinking about that night, about why I climbed out that bathroom window instead of just ending the date normally, and I think it's because my grandmother always taught me to trust my instincts. Something felt wrong about Marcus's story. Too polished, too practiced, like he'd told it so many times he'd started believing it himself. That's exactly what happened, I said. Marcus spent 18 months crafting this narrative where he was the victim and I was the villain. He told it so often, added so many details, that it became real to him. He genuinely believed his own lies. Do you think he'll ever take responsibility for what he did? I considered that. No. I think Marcus will find a way to blame me for all of this. I'll be the vindictive ex-wife who destroyed his life, who couldn't let go, who turned one little mistake into a federal case. He'll never see that he did this to himself. Does that bother you? It used to, but I've realized something. I don't need Marcus to understand or acknowledge what he did. I don't need his apology or his admission of guilt. The truth is documented now. The legal system has recognized it. That's enough. Julie raised her coffee cup. To the truth, then. I clinked my cup against hers. To the truth. 3 months later, the surgical center expansion broke ground. Morrison and Associates delivered exactly what they'd promised. Professional, competent, on schedule. I attended the groundbreaking ceremony with David Reeves and the rest of the hospital leadership, smiling for photos and shaking hands with contractors. No one mentioned Marcus. His name had been quietly erased from the project, from the history of how we'd reached this point. In 6 months, no one would remember that Hendricks and Lowe had ever been in contention for the contract. That was fine with me. I didn't need Marcus's failures to define my success. Julie thrived in her role as my assistant. She was sharp, organized, and had excellent instincts for navigating hospital politics. She'd earned the respect of the entire executive team within her first month. One afternoon, she stuck her head into my office with a grin. Just got a call from HR. They want to feature our department in the hospital newsletter. Something about exemplary leadership and team excellence. I think you've been nominated for an award. Absolutely not, I said immediately. No awards, no features. We're here to do the work, not collect accolades. Too late. I already accepted on your behalf. Her smile was unrepentant. Besides, you deserve recognition. The trauma protocols you implemented have saved lives. The merger is ahead of schedule. You're the youngest CMO in the network's history. That's newsworthy. I shook my head, but I was smiling too. You're a terrible assistant. I'm an excellent assistant. I'm just also willing to overrule you when you're being unreasonably modest. As Julie left, I turned back to my computer, to the endless stream of emails and decisions that filled my days. Somewhere out there, Marcus was living with the consequences of his choices. Somewhere, his name was mud in professional circles. Somewhere, he was probably still telling himself he was the victim. But here, in my corner office overlooking the city, I was building something that mattered. Saving lives, leading teams, making decisions that would impact thousands of patients for years to come. Marcus had wanted to destroy me, to reduce me to nothing more than a cautionary tale about crazy exes. Instead, he'd given me the perfect demonstration of why I'd been right to leave him in the first place. Some people spend their energy tearing others down. I preferred to spend mine building things that lasted. The city lights sparkled below as evening fell, and I got back to work. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.